G'day YouTube, we're here on episode 7 of the Nemesis Scrambler build. This episode we're going to aim to get the final touches of fabrication finished up and then moving on to listing out what we need to get done once the bike's pulled down for paint and powder coat. Last couple fabrication jobs on the 400 Scrambler here are going to be fabricating a little pod filter guard here to stop anything from sort of flying up this way, and then we're also going to put a couple of bag mounts on it. So I've cut and patterned out a small piece of aluminium here that's going to fix onto the frame there, and then I'm going to back that with some mesh. That'll sort of stop the bulk of things flying in from the outside, and then it's pretty well protected on the inside there as well. I've used a pre-made threaded slug that I've slotted into the frame. I'm about to weld that up, and then we'll move on to putting some bag racks on, one on this side and then some on the other side as well. Just finished up making my little pod filter guard here. Shaped it out of a bit of aluminium, welded a little slug into the frame, and then when it comes time for paint and polishing to finish it up, I'm going to back it with a bit of stainless steel gauze. I've also gone ahead and finished up my bag mounts here. Something that we've learned over the years of doing a few saddlebags and stuff for people is we get a lot of complaints about bags flapping in the wind. So when we build the bags for people, we've sort of like done a few now. We'll use a sheet of aluminium inside the bag, so we sort of layer the back of the bag with a skin and a sheet of aluminium. So when we fix it to the frame, it's a lot more sturdy and it won't flap around. So on this side, it's not going to be as critical because it's just a small bag, sort of, that it will sit above the muffler here. But on the other side, especially having that rigidity in the bag, especially on an adventure ride, is something I think is going to be really helpful. So at this stage of the build, we've just finished all the fabrication. It's just about time to tear the bike down for powder coat and paint. I think it's worth mentioning, before I do this on all my projects, I'll go through and write out a list of things that have to be done once it's pulled apart. Whether that be some welding that has to be done inside the frame, or just little bits and pieces finished up. Also, mounting your electrics is an important part to make sure you have space for everything, because we've gotten rid of the airbox completely and the battery box has been moved. Things like that are really important that you don't miss. So pretty soon we're going to have a box of 1,000 parts of everything that's on this bike, and it's really simple to overlook something, so having a list really helps. Just finished pulling the Nemesis 400 down. Jake's jumped out from behind the camera and given me a bit of a hand, so I went fairly quick. From here, I've got to do a little bit of prep on the frame and swing arm, a few bits and pieces before we send them to powder coat and paint. But until then, we've separated everything out to paint and powder coat, untouched parts ready to go back on, like our shocks and exhausts and stuff like that. These are polished and brushed bare metal parts, and then the suspension and handlebars and nuts and bolts in that box. It's important to keep notes on this sort of stuff, especially if it's your first time, because it's going to be a good 4 to 6 weeks before this bike goes back together. So if you think you might have trouble when that time comes, make sure you either take photos or take notes. Next thing we're going to get onto is painting the motor, and then once that's done, hopefully it won't be too long before we get the frame and stuff back to start putting it all together.
just got our frame back from powder coat in a brilliant silver finish. The motor's been painted now, so we're going to go ahead and start assembling the bike, getting it into a roller motor in the frame. And then I'm going to slap the raw tank on, which I haven't really decided the colour scheme or anything like that on. Once we can sort of visualise the bike as it will be, we'll decide on a paint scheme, send that off to be done, and we're getting pretty close to finishing this thing up.
So one thing I picked up from my time as a Sparky building switchgear, we had a lot of critical stuff that had to be 100% checked and torqued. So I don't trust myself to do a little bit at a time. What I'll do is I'll assemble the bike and everything is finger tight, and then I'll work from one end to the other and torque everything. So once the motor's in, the suspension's on, the wheels are on, the bars are hung, the brake calipers normally go on as well. I'll work from one end with my torque wrench, have a sheet that sort of tells me the torque that these things need to be done at, and work from one end to the other, and that way I know I haven't missed anything and everything's done.